Community Hotline. Welcome, welcome, welcome for the community, by the community. Today we have a very special guest, Mr. Chris Holt. Why don't you introduce yourself, good sir?
What's up? My name is Chris Holt. I do various different things, but basically I'm kind of in the fitness realm of social media. I manage a CrossFit gym here in Salt Lake City. I'm part of a startup called Brainstride, which is kind of another thing. I work with people remotely on nutrition, and I'm starting a podcast actually soon about adoption.
Wow, I love it. A man of many, many, many talents. What is your astrology sign before we get into this?
I am a Capricorn.
Okay. Was your birthday recent?
Yeah, December 28th.
Okay.
I'm also identical triplet, so that was also my brother's birthday. So, yeah.
All the other two of your brothers as well? Everyone had the same birthday, right?
Yeah, we're triplets. Yep. So
that's crazy. We'll get into that in a minute. Well, let's start with our first topic of the day, which is money. Tell us, what is money?
Man. I mean, when you think about the idea of wealth, it's like, is it monetary? Is it happiness? Is it fulfillment in other parts of your life?
How has your understanding of money changed from when you were in high school to now?
That's a good question. It's funny because my brothers and I were adopted into a very big, well-to-do family, and we traveled the world. And I lived overseas most of my life. I was privileged. I was spoiled. We were spoiled. So the sense of money, it's definitely changed. I think I will be the first to admit that I'm not the best with money with regards to. I mean, I save and stuff like that, but I do impulse buys like anyone else and those types of things. But as I get older, it's become more of a thing that where I'm not chasing material stuff anymore. It's a little more about experiences. As we all get older, we realize those hold more value than getting something kind of cool that you can hold in your hand type of thing. So anyone that lives in this country, in the United States, if you do your due diligence and understand a little history, Asians immigrating into this country were always considered model citizens because, they were considered, quiet, submissive, like you could kind of essentially be racist to them and they're not going to fight back, So I think it's very easy to look at, even during the Black Lives movement, or Black Lives Matter movement, I was outspoken about that because I am someone who deals with racism on social media every day. And a lot of people, surprisingly, well, not surprisingly, but a lot of people came forward and said, look, like, you're Asian, you have a lot of money. And it's just like, look, that's a stereotype. Yes, I get what you're saying because, Asians are good at math and, we're doctors and all these things. And that's not true, and so I think, any Asian kid that is growing up in a wealthy family, I think it's partly on the parents too, to kind of help them understand that, unless they're insanely wealthy where like they'll never have to work a day in their life, then that's another situation. My family was doing well, but not that well. I'm one of 8 kids. You can't, kids cost a lot of money. We all need sometimes a nice dose of reality, and in whatever form that may be, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much money you have. Like I've met people that are super, super wealthy and are just terrible human beings, just terrible. Like I said, money doesn't bring you happiness, but sure, it can bring you security. But look, if you isolate yourself from the real world, then yeah, you're never going to have a sense of reality and you're going to be in your own little bubble. And I've seen 2 shows I think it's on Netflix or Hulu, but like it's just rich Asians. Like it stems from that movie, Crazy Rich Asians. And I've watched it. And some of these people just have like stupid money, and you can see how they all live in a bubble. Like they have no sense of reality. And really, honestly, at that level of wealth, do they need it? Not really, because they're going to be kind of sequestered in their little bubble with their little circle forever. And you know what? That's fine. But I think that for the rest of us, that's not our future.
I like that. Do you think that's a good direction where the media is taking us with like showing?
I like the fact that you're seeing more representation, but I think at the same time it didn't help with this idea that like, these Asians are all just greedy and they're just money driven and they just, it's all about status and title and those types of things. But it is kind of a double-edged sword there. But I think it's important to see more representation, especially in Hollywood, for Asian Americans. So
I love that. All right, well then let's move on to the second topic of the day. Let's talk about education. Who were you in high school?
Oh, high school. I played sports, so I was on, varsity teams and stuff like that. I was a very proactive kid in high school because I worked hard in school because it was just more of a fear of failing rather than anything else. So I just didn't want to be that person, so I was in academic decathlon, which is just a funny place. Honor society, I played a bunch of different sports. I was in a writing competition group. So I did, I traveled different high schools and just write essays and stuff like that. So for me, it was all about just doing the extra just so I could obviously get into a college. And for me, that was the driving force is I want to have a good college education so then I could be independent and, make a living and do those things. And I want to be an architect since I was in 6th grade. So I eventually became an architect. And then obviously left that in 2008 when everything stopped. And that's how I kind of got into the fitness realm. But I had the worst haircut. I had the really long hair parted down the middle. And I look at pictures and I just think, why didn't someone stop me? Like, how did my family let me out of the house? Like, I even have a friend in college who I went to architecture school with. And he says to this day, and I'm still very close friends with him, he said, the first day I saw you, I just thought you were a tool. Just because you're hair. And I'm like, thanks, Mike. Thanks. So I think in high school, I didn't, like all of us, I didn't know myself. And we're all just trying to get through high school and the rigors of, adolescence and teenagers. And, just especially moving to Texas for my last years of high school was the first time I was blatantly exposed to racism face to face. So it was hard. Again, being a triplet, I have 2 other brothers that I could lean on. So I did have an advantage that sometimes I take for granted. So the first day of school, moving to a new country, new school was never that scary because I always had my brothers. So if I was by myself and I wasn't a triplet, a far worse situation, especially since I deal with depression, anxiety, and PTSD from a young age. If I didn't have my brothers or even my family, I think things would have ended differently.
Can you talk about those challenges? Like, what were some major challenges you faced in middle school, high school, just so we can hear it, so that the other kids who might be experiencing the same things can kind of have some tools to kind of work through it or stuff like that?
Living overseas, especially when I was overseas, from kindergarten to 10th grade, lived in Italy, Singapore, London, and Norway, and during those years, to be very honest, America was viewed as it's America. Like, everyone wants to go to America. Everyone loves the U.S. Obviously, that's changed in recent years, but I never faced any type of racism. I don't know. I just felt like, and that gave me this false sense that we're moving forward as a society and systemic racism doesn't exist and, everyone's equal and women's rights and LGBTQ community, all these things are progressing. And I was like, all right, this is the future. This is the world I want to live in. I want to live in a progressive world that is not looking at, race, but more of we are all humans and that's one race, we're the human race. Moving to Texas was jarring because now, I learned that racism is taught, as we all know, and it's still being taught and it's alive and good. And there is not one time that I go home to visit my parents in Texas. My dad and I might go to a liquor store or grocery store. It's always a good liquor store. There's always a pickup truck with 3 to 5 white dudes that honk at me, tell me to go back to where I came from. It always happens. Like clockwork. And so when I tell people that, or I post it on my social media, people are like, why didn't you say something? I'm like, if I want to get beat up by 5 guys, cool, yeah, but I'm not interested in that. And more importantly, what am I going to do? I'm not going to change these people, and that's not my job. Face that, but then also, being an adoptee has its own challenges. Having white parents, you just kind of get used to people staring. It was a very challenging time in my life for sure. So
What do you think? What do you think? Do you have any nephews or anything like that that are in school right now? What challenges do you think they're going through right now, or have they shared with you?
yeah, I have nieces and nephews. One of my triplet brothers has a son, so Nico is the only nephew that I have that is blood related to me. But regardless, I mean, look, my brother's a physician and professor at Yale. Like his kids are these cute blonde hair, blue eyed girls. They're going to be fine. It's more of, my nephew, Nico, but he's Canadian. And I feel like everyone's just super nice in Canada. So I think he's okay. But then my older sister has 3 kids that are mulatto, so they're half white, half black. So I think that they're going to face challenges. But again, they live in Miami, and that's a huge Latin culture. My brother-in-law is Dominican. I don't know. I think for them, not so worried, but I think for the rest of Asian youth and especially in this country, as much as I'm hoping for positive change with this new administration, at the end of the day, they're all politicians. And, it's sadly the system that we have here it's broken. But I'm just hopeful that we can kind of move towards some positive change and unity over, division and intolerance. But like anything else, it's just not going to change overnight. And I think as long as things like this are happening where we can open a dialogue about it, that's really, in my opinion, the only way forward. If we don't talk about it, then, kind of like men's mental health is something that is very taboo. And since I'm very outspoken about it, I just say, look, men suicide rates are higher than women because we live in a culture where it's like, sack up, just be a man, don't cry, don't show emotions. And I think a lot of lives can be saved if people guys knew that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to cry. It's okay to just feel like you can't do it on your own. And there's nothing wrong with asking for help, so.
I agree. I think that's big in like the Asian culture too.
Yeah, there's these gender roles, especially in the Asian culture. I mean, it's even more intense, I think, from what I know and understand, even though I'm not immersed in that. There's lots of pressure. Being the firstborn male, like you have a lot of pressure to kind of continue a legacy or a lineage. There are lots of expectations put on even my friends that are Asian in Asian families. It's always about like, you got to be a doctor, you got to be a lawyer, you got to do these things. But I think what's happening now is that was cool maybe 30, 40, 50 years ago. But we live in a very different time now, where it's more common for people in our demographic to have 3 to 4 different professions, maybe in a lifetime, because like my dad, like he worked for Exxon his entire life. Like that doesn't happen anymore. You don't do that, especially with this pandemic, with the economy. I mean, you can't just rely on, stability and job security is just not there, and we have to be able to adapt. We have to be able to kind of go with the flow. Because if you keep your eyes closed on opportunities that might not even be part of what you're kind of like thinking about, you could miss out on like another path, And so I encourage everyone just to kind of keep your eyes open. Just because I graduated with an architecture degree and I am a former architect, I thought I was gonna do that for the rest of my life. But I just understood that, look, I can't, as much as I could tell myself, I spent all this money on this 5-year degree and like all this stuff, if I just put my blinders on, I would have missed out on the opportunities I have that I'm doing today, So I think it's a matter of, yes, education is imperative. You need it. You need to get that degree. But just don't think that you're pigeonholed into one thing. All my friends that I graduated with, there's maybe only 2 or 3 that I still know that are still doing architecture. Everyone else is doing something else. So yeah, especially 2008. 2008, the economy crashed and like buildings stopped. And so that's a very unique situation for, it's not just architecture, most industries, but building especially, I just decided to leave that profession, which was scary and it was like jumping off a cliff, but I just knew at the time in 2000, I started CrossFit in like 2005, and I knew by opening a CrossFit gym in Miami in 2008, at the time there were no CrossFit gyms. I knew where CrossFit was going as a fitness program and a sport, despite people telling me I was crazy. They're like, no one's going to do CrossFit. Like, that's too intense. Like, no way. And I'm like, just you wait. Like, you're going to know someone that does it eventually. Like, that's just the way it's going to be. And honestly, everyone thought I was crazy. So that goes into the idea that you're going to have a lot of people that are going to try to bring you down, that are going to tell you that it's not going to work. They're going to discourage you, but you need to go with your gut at sometimes.
But let's move on to the last topic of the day, which is love. And I think it's one of the most important ones as well. Here's the age-old question. What is love?
For me, when I hear love, I think that it needs to start with the individual. You need to love yourself. You need to be happy with yourself. You need to be able to sit in a room with nothing going on and just be happy with who you are, where you're going, and where you are right now. Because outside of that, if that's not there, just like anything else, trolls and these keyboard warriors, all these people project their issues onto other people, and we all inadvertently do it. So I work with a lot of people on nutritional coaching, and they've come to realize that when they eat poor, they gain weight, and then they don't feel good about themselves, and then they project that issue onto other people inadvertently and subconsciously. So I think love needs to start within. You need to we all need to learn to love ourselves more. And then only then can we meaningfully move forward, develop meaningful relationships, platonic and romantic. And I think, especially in work, in what you do, if you don't love yourself and you don't love what you're doing, then don't do it. I think we're all led to believe that work needs to be something that you just dread every day. And it's like, oh, I got to go to the office. And sometimes, yeah, you need to do what you need to do to pay the bills. But, I think now more than ever, because of this pandemic, everyone's quarantined, everyone's at home, working from home, doing remote work. I think moonlighting is not a bad thing. Start a passion project, start something that you think could lead into something that could be a viable source of income for you. I never thought that social media would bring me money. Like, that's just a weird concept to me. But it has, and I'm grateful for it. As much as I think there are a ton of negative things about social media, I'm kind of in between that kind of double-edged sword area where, as much as I see the negative aspects of social media on mental health, especially for me, I get paid post. I get paid by my sponsors to, promote products that I believe in. And as long as I can maintain some semblance of authenticity, I'm okay with that. As much as some people might see paid partnership with so-and-so, they're gonna be like, ugh, blah, like another paid advertisement. This guy is just pushing crap on people. Again, that's gonna happen. But
you gotta live life, man. Who was your first love?
My first love. Well, no, my first love was the sport of basketball, which is kind of random. My bros and I were obsessed with basketball, especially growing up in the 80s and 90s. The NBA, that was the time. That was the best moment for basketball, which we will never get back. And my brothers and I always joke, we're going to be the first Asians in the NBA and blah, blah, blah. And obviously it didn't happen. But yeah, I would say basketball was my first love. It was something that I just thought about every day, every night. Any free moment we had, we'd be playing basketball. Unfortunately, we were living in Norway at the time, and during the summer, we lived in Stavanger, which is on the southern tip of Norway, so we didn't get the full effect of it. But in the summer, it was like 20 hours of daylight. So maybe 2 a.m, like this, we'd be outside playing basketball. It was just like, yeah, it's light out. This is so weird. Cool. So we played a lot of basketball. So
what would you say is a defining moment in your life?
For me, I went through a lot of health issues growing up. So I had 4 lung surgeries. And that is really the start of a lot of my deep depression that I developed. It's a long story, but defining moment for me, I just remember I had my 3rd lung surgery, which was my 2nd deep bout of depression, suicidal thoughts, and like asking questions that had no answers. But I remember my basketball coach, my varsity basketball coach, kind of saw where I was going, just mentally and just the way I talked about things, and he was concerned. So he pulled me in his office, and I'll never forget it. I was in ninth grade and just a really angry person at that point. And he sat me down and he says, look, I'm going to give you some advice that my football coach gave me when I was playing football at Harvard. I'm not going to explain to you what it means, but you will figure it out. And I'm like, what? And he says, picture yourself straddling a line. Your left foot's in the past, your right foot's in the future, and you're pissing on the present. And I'm like, whoa, what? And he says, get out of my office. I'm like, no, coach, what does that mean? He's like, you'll figure it out. And it haunted me for years. And what I came to realize was that I spend a lot of my time, which is where, people that deal with mental health issues we reside in the past, we reside in the future. We're constantly worrying, focusing on things that happen, like, oh, what if I did this differently? Or what if I did that differently? Or you use the past as a scapegoat as to why you can't go to get to where you want to be. And like, oh, it's because this happened to me and I can't do it now. And then we worry about things that may never happen, because of our past. And I realized many years later that for us to dictate, if you want to dictate and control where you want to go, which ultimately as human beings, we all want more control in our lives. I would say that's the number one thing we wish we all had. Because of this pandemic, we've realized hyperbolically that there are a lot of things out of our control. But what I've learned is that for you to really want to dictate where you want to go in life, the only thing you can control is what is in the present. So just focus on now. And it's really hard. Being present is hard because our minds wander and we're attracted to drama and we're attracted to these things. And it's our ego just kind of saying, hey, no, let's focus on this stuff because this will just create something in your life that just, doesn't mean anything, So I think it's important to focus on the present, and then you'll have a better chance of controlling where your path leads you. So again, every situation is different. My parents at a very young age always instilled in us, look, you can talk to us about anything. And I know you always hear this, but so I've always had a very open dialogue and relationship with my parents, and I could tell them anything. And I would just say for anyone listening or watching this, if you're having a difficult time opening up to your parents, you don't need to unload heavy things. Just start with a simple conversation or start with a simple thought or feeling you might be having. And again, it's a two-way street. If you have a parent that isn't going to reciprocate that, then you're kind of at a crossroads. So I think it's not just the kids' responsibility, but it's also the parents' responsibility to foster an environment that lends a open kind of communication policy, because look, you're not going to tell your parents everything, but just know for the most part, they've been through a lot. As human beings, as we age, we just experience life more, and many of us are jaded by it. Many of us, or whatever, but there is something you can take from them, from their experience, mistakes that they made or successes they had. But my parents always kind of made us think about who we were hanging out with too, because I think even as a young kid, who you hang out with really does matter. So if you're hanging out with a crowd that doesn't care about education, doesn't care about getting good grades, doesn't care about even just fitness and health and just living a healthy life, you're going to succumb to that lifestyle, So fortunately, I grew up in private schools, and granted, there were a lot of troubled youth kids that I've met along the way, but ultimately, everyone was pretty driven. So I always surrounded myself with people, especially sports. Play sports, guys. It's a great way to make friends, to join a community. I think that's the biggest thing for kids in high school or middle school is that you don't feel like you belong, and you're just trying to find your group. And sports is a great way to do it. And look, if you're not athletic and that's not your thing, it's fine. There's drama clubs. There's all sorts of different things. I was an academic decathlon. I did honor society. I was in that ready writing group. When I got to college, I had my architecture friends. I had my fraternity brothers. I was on the co-ed cheerleading team at the University of Miami for 3 years. So I had my cheerleading group. So just diversify your groups. Just get out there and form relationships with people that you want to maybe be more like, or you see a quality in that person that you think I can learn from. And that is, I think, a big thing. But going back to the parents, you just need to, communication is everything. If you don't communicate, people can't read minds. They can't just, oh, well, he's my dad, he should just know. It's like the classic relationship. We've been married for 15 years. You should know this bothers me. It's like, I can't read your mind. Like, come on. So it's about managing expectations across all types of relationships. And that comes down to communication.
Love that. All right, final two questions. One, what makes you your neck piece? You know, tell us a story behind it, your emotions. I think that's a pretty big step in anyone's life to get their neck tatted.
I always told myself I'm just gonna get one tattoo. It was this nautical star on my chest, and I was like, I'm done. And if you look at me now, you're like, whoa, like, that definitely didn't go the way you planned. Once I realized I could be in a profession that didn't really care about tattoos, and especially now, I think it's way more accepted. It's less taboo. So for me, honestly, the neck sleeve wasn't a big step, only because I have my ears tattooed. So it's like I kind of jumped a level there. So as much as, yes, the neck, hands, like anything that's super visible, you're like, oh, okay, like that's intense. And most people are like, oh, you're never going to work ever again. Like, no one's going to hire you. For me, my neck piece, most of my tattoos deal with my life living overseas or my family or something that means something to me. My tattoo artist, and I've had many, but the one that I'm working with now, and I've been working with almost 10 years now, he did my back piece, my leg, which we're connecting to one big piece. And then now he did my neck. We just decided that we wanted the piece. It didn't necessarily have to be something that had deep meaning for me. It was more about, Nakono always says, he's like, dude, this is a statement piece. Let's just do something that stands out. So we did a bunch of like dark lines to accent, the sort of clavicular master muscle here. And then this is all geometric stippling and stuff like that. And then on the back, there's a Korean block pattern, which he wanted to kind of throw in something Korean. And then he has a Lewis ink kind of psychedelic, kind of like I always liked MC Escher, and I like Magic Eye paintings and things that kind of had some kind of kinetic art aspect to it. So we did that on the back. And then, we did 2 back-to-back sessions. So it was 4.5 hours roughly on a Thursday, Friday. So doing 2 sessions back-to-back, I would not recommend to anyone. So we didn't finish everything. I do want to do stippling up to my jawline, but ultimately tattoos for me bring me joy. So that's why I do it. And, I get so many people that just, oh, Yakuza. And I'm like, no, like racist first off, secondly, no. Or people will say, oh, don't you regret it? Or, oh, when you get old, they're going to be all wrinkly. I'm like, when you're old, you're going to be wrinkly regardless. So who cares, So for me, it's just a personal thing. And I just like tattoos. I want to eventually cover most of my body. So that's kind of the goal. So.
Okay. All right. And then last and final question is, what are 2 pieces of life advice you have for, kids that are similar in your situation, like maybe Asian kids or Korean kids who are adopted by white parents? What are 2 pieces of life you have for those kids?
I would say, first off, find a Korean adoptee group. There are many of them in all major cities. I'm not saying that if you're Japanese or Chinese or Vietnamese or any other Asian, even not Asian, like anyone that's adopted, I'm not saying that there aren't groups like that, but Korean adoption in the 60s, 70s, and 80s is a very unique time. And so Korea gave up like 140,000 babies. And so it's a long history behind that, which I'm still educating myself on. But I would say, first off, yes, if you are a Korean adoptee, find a group. I think you could quickly find a community that, I think, regardless of race, all adoptees feel alone. They feel like people don't understand them. They feel like there's something missing that they can't really put their finger on. So I think once you connect with other people that have those same viewpoints and feelings, that's going to be a very big thing. And I did it very late in life, and I regret that. I wish I had found that sooner. And then secondly, I would say, and just at life advice in general, I had a history teacher in London. He would always say this, and it sounded very morbid, but he just said, look, life's unfair and then you die. And I'm like, ouch. And as I get older, I realize, yes, life is unfair. You see unfairness every day, you know, seeing amazing people die from cancer or whatever it may be. And then you see, obviously, the nasty parts of this country. I think it's important to just know that there are going to be difficult times, and it's in those moments that you can really define who you are. Because anyone that just lives in this happy, hunky-dory, like everything's rainbows and sunshine, you're lying to yourself. You know, I think it's important that when you experience negative things, negative feelings, negative experiences, acknowledge the emotion. It's okay, but don't hold on to it. You know, I think it's too often we hold on to these things and we carry them with us when most of that stuff is just baggage that's holding you down. So it's okay to feel those things. It's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel, you know, anger maybe towards someone else that was treating you badly or whatever, a bully or someone, a bigot or a racist or whatever. Just don't hold on to it because it will corrode your heart and stop you ultimately from moving forward. So I think it's important to just acknowledge it, move forward, roll with the punches, and just know that any negative experience is a learning experience, and that's a positive thing. So it's so easy to say, well, this happened to me and this happened to me. I suffer from depression. I have suicidal thoughts. I had 4 lung surgeries. I had a near-death car accident. Like, life sucks. It's like, dude, yeah, life does suck. But it's not as bad as you think, and you can use those negative things as fuel to propel you forward. So just know that every opportunity is an opportunity to, again, move forward and get closer to where you want to be. So,
got it. Every opportunity is an opportunity to move closer to where you want to be. I love that. Before I forget, guys, 88 Real Estate Media is looking for members to join the oversight committee to build the best Kung Fu school in the world. Send us a message if you're interested in that. Other than that, Chris, thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.